Imagine this for a moment. Your days are full. Your calendar is packed. You're busy from morning till night, constantly moving, constantly doing. And yet, somewhere deep inside, there's a quiet, uncomfortable feeling that something isn't right. You're getting things done, but not the things that truly matter. You're efficient, productive, even successful by many standards, but misaligned. This is the central tension of First Things First. Not a book about doing more, not a book about speed, but a book about direction, about the difference between living by the clock and living by the compass, and how confusing the two can slowly drain meaning from even the most successful life. The clock and the compass. The authors begin with a powerful question. If working harder, faster, and smarter hasn't solved the problem, what will? Across the world, they met capable, committed people, leaders, parents, professionals, who were exhausted, stressed, and frustrated. Not because they were lazy or disorganized, but because their time was being spent on things that did not align with what they valued most. At the heart of the problem is a gap between what we feel is deeply important and how we actually spend our time. Traditional time management focuses on efficiency, getting more done in less time. But efficiency alone cannot close this gap. In many cases, it makes the gap wider. The authors introduce a defining metaphor. The clock represents schedules, appointments, deadlines, tasks, how we manage time. The compass represents vision, values, principles, conscience, and purpose, how we lead our lives. When the clock is not guided by the compass, we can move very fast in the wrong direction. The promise of this book is not a new planner or technique, but a new way of thinking. A fourth-generation approach that is principle-centered, purpose-driven, and focused on quality of life, not just output. Section 1. The Clock and the Compass. This section begins by confronting a feeling many people struggle to articulate. Life feels busy, crowded, and demanding, yet strangely hollow. People are accomplishing more than ever, but they're not necessarily happier, calmer, or more fulfilled. The authors argue that the problem is not lack of effort or discipline. The problem is direction. At the center of this struggle is the gap between what matters most and how time is actually spent. People care deeply about family, health, relationships, integrity, contribution, and personal growth. Yet their days are consumed by meetings, emails, deadlines, interruptions, and expectations set by others. This disconnect creates frustration, guilt, and a persistent sense of imbalance. The authors introduce the core metaphor of the book, the clock and the compass. The clock represents schedules, calendars, appointments, efficiency, and productivity. It measures time. The compass represents vision, values, principles, conscience, and purpose. It gives direction. When life is governed by the clock alone, people move faster and faster without knowing whether they are heading towards something meaningful. When the compass is ignored, even success feels empty. The pain of this gap shows up in different ways. Some people feel intense pressure and exhaustion, constantly reacting to crises and demands. Others experience a quieter discomfort, a vague sense that something is missing. Some reach professional success only to feel disappointed and disoriented when it does not deliver the fulfillment they expected. Others feel trapped, believing change is too costly or unrealistic. The authors emphasize that most of life's hardest choices are not between good and bad, but between good and best. Many worthwhile activities compete for attention, and without a clear sense of priority, the best things are crowded out by the merely good. Over time, this leads to regret and the feeling that life is being lived by default instead of by choice. To explain why this happens, the authors examine the evolution of traditional time management. The first generation focuses on reminders, lists, and notes to keep track of tasks. It offers flexibility but lacks structure and long-term direction. Important commitments are easily forgotten, and life is governed by whatever appears most pressing at the moment. The second generation introduces planning and preparation. Calendars, schedules, and appointment books bring more order and responsibility. Efficiency improves, and people feel more in control. However, the schedule becomes the master. Relationships are often treated as interruptions, and success is measured by how well the plan is executed rather than whether the plan is meaningful. The third generation builds on this by adding values, priorities, and goal setting. People clarify what they want, set long-term and short-term goals, and plan each day carefully. Productivity increases significantly. Yet despite these gains, many people feel stressed, rigid, and unfulfilled. They are achieving goals without achieving peace. The authors argue that these three generations share flawed assumptions. They assume control is possible, when in reality principles govern outcomes. They assume efficiency leads to effectiveness, when direction matters more than speed. They assume values alone are sufficient, even when those values may conflict with natural laws that govern quality of life. They treat people like things to be managed rather than individuals to be led. They focus on chronological time while ignoring the quality and meaning of moments. They emphasize competence while neglecting character. They prioritize management over leadership. Because of these flawed paradigms, people often become highly productive but deeply dissatisfied. Changing tools or techniques cannot solve this problem. Only a change in thinking can. This leads to the need for a fourth generation, an approach that moves beyond time management to life leadership. Instead of asking how to do more, it asks what truly deserves to be done. A major obstacle to this shift is urgency addiction. Many people become dependent on the pressure and excitement of urgent situations. Urgency feels important. Being busy feels validating. Solving crises provides an adrenaline rush and a sense of worth. Over time, people begin to equate busyness with significance. Urgency addiction temporarily masks deeper unmet needs, such as connection, purpose, growth, and balance. Instead of addressing these needs, people chase urgent tasks to stay in motion. Traditional time management tools often reinforce this addiction by keeping attention focused on daily emergencies. To clarify this pattern, the authors introduce the time management matrix. Activities fall into four categories based on urgency and importance. Quadrant I includes activities that are urgent and important, such as crises, deadlines, and pressing problems. These cannot be ignored, but many of them exist because important work was neglected earlier. Quadrant II contains activities that are important but not urgent. This includes planning, preparation, prevention, relationship building, learning, personal development, and renewal. This is the quadrant of quality and leadership. These activities do not demand attention. They must be chosen. Quadrant 3 consists of activities that are urgent but not important. These are distractions masquerading as priorities, many meetings, calls, and requests driven by other people's agendas. Quadrant 4 includes activities that are neither urgent nor important, such as mindless distractions that provide temporary escape but no real restoration. Most people spend the majority of their time in quadrants I and III. As urgency dominates, importance fades. The cost is high. Stress increases, relationships weaken, and meaningful progress stalls. The authors argue that reclaiming time from Quadrant 3 is the key to investing more in Quadrant 2. True effectiveness comes from shifting the dominant paradigm from urgency to importance. When people operate from importance, they still handle urgent matters, but by choice rather than compulsion. Over time, investing in Quadrant 2 reduces crises, builds capacity, and creates a sense of control grounded in principles rather than pressure. Section 2. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Section 2 translates the ideas of importance into a practical, principle-centered approach to organizing life. The core message is simple but demanding. The clock must be subordinated to the compass. Instead of planning life day by day based on urgency, the authors advocate planning week by week based on purpose. Weekly planning provides a broader perspective that allows people to see how their time aligns with what matters most. It becomes a bridge between long-term vision and daily action. The process begins with mission. A personal mission clarifies why a person does what they do. It defines values, purpose, and direction. This mission becomes a reference point for decisions, helping people say yes to what matters and no to what is not. Without a mission, priorities shift with pressure. Next, life is viewed through roles. People live in multiple roles: professional, family member, partner, friend, individual. Balance does not mean equal time in every role, but conscious attention to each. Identifying roles ensures that no vital area of life is consistently neglected. From mission and roles come goals. These goals are principle-based rather than driven by ego or urgency. They focus on contribution, growth, and integrity. Goals are framed as commitments to act in alignment with values, not merely outcomes to achieve. Weekly organizing then brings these elements together. Instead of filling time slots with tasks, people schedule priorities, relationships, preparation, learning, and prevention. The week becomes an intentional expression of what matters most. A critical aspect of this approach is integrity in the moment of choice. Life is unpredictable. Plans will be disrupted. The true test of leadership is knowing when to follow the plan and when to adapt without guilt or confusion. Decisions are guided by principles rather than pressure. Over time, this approach creates an upward spiral. Each week builds awareness, capacity, and confidence. People learn from experience, refine their mission, and improve their ability to choose what is important. Life becomes proactive instead of reactive, focused instead of fragmented, and purposeful instead of pressured. Section 3. The Synergy of Interdependence. Section 3 addresses a reality that traditional time management almost completely ignores: the fact that most of our time is spent with other people. No matter how disciplined or efficient someone becomes, life does not happen in isolation. Families, teams, organizations, and communities shape both how time is spent and the quality of results that follow. The authors argue that most time management systems are built on an independence mindset. They focus on personal control, individual productivity, and self-centered achievement. In this mindset, other people are often seen as interruptions, obstacles, or resources to be managed. Time spent with others is evaluated primarily by efficiency rather than meaning. But this view clashes with reality. The greatest successes, deepest fulfillment, and most lasting contributions in life come through relationships. Parenting, leadership, teamwork, marriage, mentorship, and service are all inherently interdependent. They cannot be reduced to schedules or checklists without losing their power. To explain this difference, the authors distinguish between transactional and transformational relationships. Transactional relationships are based on exchange. I do this, you do that. Expectations are narrow, communication is limited, and trust is conditional. These relationships may function, but they rarely inspire commitment or creativity. Transformational relationships, on the other hand, are built on shared purpose, trust, and mutual respect. In these relationships, people are changed by the interaction itself. New insights emerge, understanding deepens, and outcomes exceed what any individual could have produced alone. This is synergy, the creation of something greater than the sum of its parts. Synergy cannot be forced through control or efficiency. It grows from alignment around principles and vision. When people understand why they're working together and feel respected and trusted, cooperation becomes natural rather than enforced. A central concept in this section is empowerment. Traditional delegation often focuses on efficiency, assigning tasks to get more done faster. Empowerment goes deeper. It involves sharing purpose, authority, and responsibility so that people can use their judgment, creativity, and strengths. Empowered people do not wait to be told what to do. They take ownership. They solve problems proactively. They feel accountable not because they are monitored, but because they are committed. This dramatically reduces the need for supervision, correction, and crisis management, freeing time for higher-level contribution. The authors emphasize that empowerment requires trust, and trust is built through character and competence. Clear expectations, shared values, and open communication create an environment where people feel safe to contribute fully. To support this, The book introduces the idea of synergistic agreements. Instead of rigid rules or vague expectations, these agreements clarify desired results, guidelines, resources, accountability, and consequences. When agreements are clear, people spend less time negotiating, defending, or correcting, and more time creating value. As synergy grows, conflict changes in nature. Disagreements are no longer threats, but opportunities to learn. Differences in perspective become strengths rather than obstacles. Time once lost to friction, politics, and misunderstanding is reclaimed for meaningful progress. Ultimately, this section reframes relationships as the greatest leverage point for effectiveness. By moving from control to collaboration, from transactions to transformation, people unlock both higher results and deeper satisfaction. Section 4. The Power and Peace of Principle-Centered Living. Section 4 brings the ideas of the book together by showing what life looks like when it is consistently guided by principles rather than pressure. The authors describe principle-centered living as a way of being grounded in timeless truths: honesty, responsibility, respect, fairness, service, rather than fluctuating moods, external expectations, or urgent demands. When decisions are made through this lens, life becomes more coherent and less conflicted. One of the most visible outcomes of principle-centered living is peace. This peace does not come from the absence of problems, but from alignment. When actions match values, people experience confidence and clarity even in difficult circumstances. They are able to say no without guilt and yes without resentment. People who live this way are not constantly torn between competing priorities. They recognize that not everything important can be done at once, but everything important can be honored over time. They accept seasons of imbalance without panic, trusting that alignment, not perfection, is the goal. The authors also address common obstacles that prevent people from sustaining this approach. One is overcommitment, the tendency to say yes out of fear, guilt, or the desire to please. Another is the belief that constant busyness is proof of worth. A third is the illusion that life will slow down someday, allowing space for what truly matters. Principle-centered living challenges these assumptions. It teaches that worth is not measured by activity, that relationships cannot be postponed indefinitely, and that neglecting what matters most always comes at a cost. Through real-life examples, the authors show how people who apply fourth-generation principles experience tangible changes. They handle stress more effectively, communicate more clearly, and feel more present in their roles. Work becomes more meaningful because it is connected to purpose. Personal life becomes richer because it is no longer sacrificed to urgency. Another key theme is renewal. Living by principles includes caring for physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Without renewal, even the best intentions collapse under fatigue. Principle-centered people protect time for rest, reflection, learning, and connection, recognizing that these investments increase capacity rather than reduce productivity. The section concludes by emphasizing that fulfillment is not achieved through shortcuts or techniques. It is the natural result of living in harmony with principles that govern quality of life. When the compass consistently guides the clock, people experience both effectiveness and inner peace, not occasionally, but as a way of life. When the clock is guided by the compass, life changes. Work becomes meaningful. Relationships deepen. Time expands, not in quantity, but in quality. First things first is not about managing minutes. It is about honoring what matters most and having the courage to live by it every week, one choice at a time.